Getchell, Director of Employer Relations at the Career Center. And I do hear a lot from our employers. Good stuff, but also some of the stuff, encounters that they have with students at networking events and receptions, at lunches, at dinners, of course during the interview process. And there are some things that happen that you'd be surprised. Of course, that was exaggerated, but we do hear and see a lot of things that are examples of what not to do. So I'm glad to be here today. I want to give Lindsay an opportunity to introduce herself as well. And we're excited to be here today. This is a very important topic. It's also a topic I think you can have a lot of fun with. As you saw from the video, some of the stuff that we're going to cover lends itself to some humor. So hopefully you'll learn a lot today, but also have some fun with this. I should give you a little bit of a disclaimer before I start. Most of my presentation is photos, and a lot of those photos are of food. So you will likely leave today feeling very hungry. Images of lobster and other food, bread, chocolate cake, all kinds of stuff. So if you're not hungry now, you certainly will be when I finish today. I do not have a lot of content on each of the slides on purpose. It's more kind of talking points for me and to keep your attention. So you may want to make some notes. I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes giving the presentation, and then we're going to actually do a little quiz at the end and give away some prizes. So pay close attention. See if you can be the winner of one of those prizes. And then any questions you have at the end, I'll save some time, hopefully 5-10 minutes, to give you an opportunity to ask any questions, things that aren't covered in the presentation or just things you're curious about. How does that sound? All right. Well, let's start by getting my slide thing to work. Maybe not. It did recognize it. I'm not sure. Yeah, if you don't mind, Lindsay, we'll go with that. So that's not working. No? Yeah, I did that one manually. So anyway, we'll start with why is etiquette important? You saw the video. But just throw out a couple thoughts on why etiquette is important, why we need etiquette. Good impression, particularly when we're talking about employers, right? Especially if they've invited you for a lunch interview or dinner interview. And this is actually a cool little Frisbee. Great day for this, right? So that's one reason. Other reasons you can think of? Exactly. Shows you're professional, prepared on top of that. Maybe you've taken some initiative to do some research and preparation on what's appropriate and proper etiquette. All right, a couple other comments. There'll be more opportunities later for these Frizzies, but a couple other comments I wanted to make. It's important, etiquette is important in social situations, obviously, when you're hanging out with friends and family, but also important in business situations, business settings as well. And I think one of the key things to remember with etiquette is that you're making yourself look good, right? And you're coming across as prepared and professional, all the things you just mentioned. But it also makes other people that you're with feel respected and important, right? We learned that partially from the video. And another thought on that is just that it really puts people at ease. Typically, if you're going into a situation that's unknown or unfamiliar, it can be scary, but if you are more prepared, you know the attire, you know what's appropriate and what's expected, you're typically going to feel more at ease about that situation. So that's part of etiquette as well. It's not just putting rules out there for the sake of rules, but just giving some parameters to put people at ease. All right, you can go. Yes, so let's all stand up, get the blood flowing, and I want you to shake hands with the person next to you. Here and do this. All right. Thank you. Great job. Thank you. I saw lots of smiles. I saw lots of eye contact. It looks like lots of firm handshakes. I think we got some good handshakes in this room. If you don't call your partner out, but if your partner didn't give you such a great handshake, you might want to, practice again with them after class, or just, know what, kind of pull them aside and say, hey, we want to work on that handshake you gave me. It wasn't very good, but in private. But what I want to do is just model that for each of you. You want it web to web is the goal, so the web part of your hand here should connect with the other person's web, and then, hi, I'm Holly Getchell. It's nice to meet you.
Hi, Lindsay Day. Nice to meet you too.
See that? Perfect. Firm handshake, eye contact, smile, and stating your full name is appropriate. So especially in an interview situation, or again, if it's a meal, make sure that if you're sitting that you stand up to greet that person. Give them that firm handshake. Eye contact, smile. They're forming that impression of you right away. And we all know that, right? Those first few seconds, those first few minutes are really crucial to the impression, the opinion that they form of you. So make sure that it's a really strong impression. I think that's really it for that one, just realizing the importance of that firm handshake. Introductions. Who in here has struggled with introductions in the past? Not forgetting someone's name or not sure how to do it. It can be challenging. Do you have a story?
No, I know we mentioned that before. Everyone talks about how we forget. I asked them twice when they introduced themselves just now, earlier. And in that amount of time, I knew Holly, but I didn't know what I had asked her again. And everyone here, we discussed that already. How it's almost impossible that we shake hands and tell us your name, and immediately we don't know. And then when you ask that question, they didn't raise their hand. I go, I know they have problems with now. Ask the question again. Watch.
Does anyone in here have problems with introductions?
Good.
Okay. I saw a lot more hands. They can be difficult, they can be challenging. Dr. Karnak handled it beautifully. If you forget someone's name or you're not sure you heard it correctly, always ask them to repeat it. Make sure you got it correct. Don't just breeze over it and be like, oh, no, I'll just get by without knowing it. Because then at the end of the meal or at the end of that interview or whatever it is, you want to be able to repeat their name back. And so it's more appropriate, it's proper etiquette to actually ask them to repeat it or ask them for their name again. A lot of people are not very good with remembering names, so you're not alone. And in terms of the actual introduction, etiquette says that you introduce the person with the most authority first. And so you would say their name first and introduce them. So if we'll use an example of Dr. Karnak, a professor with a graduate assistant, I would say, Dr. Karnak, I'd like you to meet my graduate assistant, Lindsay Day. And that's typically the way that works. So that's in business situations, again, in social situations, but that's just a nice way of remembering how that introduction goes. If it's a client, let's say you got that first job, you have a role where you're working a lot with clients, with customers, the client always has the authority. So just remembering that, I think, is key. All right? That's pretty much it for introductions. We'll move on. Name tags. And Lindsay's got an example here for this. A lot of times you'll go to an event, and they may have one of these self-adhesive kind of name tags, and you want to write your name clearly, first and last name. Make sure that that's easy to read. And if you don't have good handwriting, hopefully somebody else that's standing in line with you or that's there does, and you can just ask them for some assistance with that. Now, other name tags you might get at a conference or workshop might hang lower, right? So if we'll let's hang here. This one's not terrible, but sometimes they'll hang way down. That's awkward, right? We all agree that's awkward? And you're looking for their name, and where are you looking? Yeah, that's not good. So let's skip that. Let's say you check in at a conference or workshop, and you have one of these names. What you want to do is immediately adjust it, put a knot in it, Vanna White here, so that it is up higher, okay? So that when you're shaking hands with that person, they can see your name tag without looking down, all right?
Same if you're sitting at a table.
Right, you don't want that in your plate, your meal, so make adjustments to your name tag as needed. Now, where to place the name tag? Again, back to the self-adhesive kind or the magnetic name tags, make sure that you're always placing that to the right. Why would you do that? Exactly. Most of us right-handed, they're going to see your name tag when they're shaking your hand. So we see a lot of students at career fairs and different events. We give them their name tag, and they have that moment of, where do I put this? And so just get in the habit of putting that on the right side.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and interrupt periodically with questions because you brought up a couple things I haven't, not mine, so hopefully you'll pick it up. But what happens, I go to a lot of conferences, and you rely on that name tag to remind you of a person. You know that you should know that person's name, and what is so crazy is,
Down here.
oh, hey Bill, is when it's like this.
Yes.
So make sure your own name tag, something about these, I don't like them. In fact, I have, if there's any way I can permanently attach it, I attach it because invariably it goes like that. And then really, so the person, I'm not as worried about them knowing my name as much as I want to make sure I know their name. So what do you do if it's like that? I'm looking at them, I know I should know their name.
Again,
Do
I go with the honesty policy. I'm sorry, your name has slipped my mind. Can you remind me?
So you shouldn't do this?
I don't think I'd go up and flip it for them, no.
Okay, I have done that before.
Yeah, have you? All right.
Now I know.
Now you know.
That was wrong. Okay.
You might be invading their personal space, just no, asking them to share their name is fine. And again, they've been in that situation themselves, so a lot of people understand that. In terms of networking events and receptions, I want to spend some time on this because I feel like this is something that's going to come up a lot in life, whether it be, again, social, you're going to someone's wedding, and it's kind of a mix and mingle portion where you're getting food, or be in business settings, professional associations, or information sessions, things with employers. So either way, you need to be prepared for those. So some general tips first. General tips are you always want to arrive and greet the employer or recruiter. We saw that in the video. You also want to, if it's a host or hostess kind of situation, go and introduce yourself if you haven't met them before, or certainly, again, say hello. So start with that person first, right? And then you can take a look at the room. Get a sense of the event. Are people standing? Is there food? Is there drink? Is there both? Are there tables? I think that sounds kind of silly, but that's going to help you decide, do I get, like if there are no tables, you're probably not going to load up a plate of food and get a drink, and then you're not going to have a hand free, right? And that's going to be awkward. So I hate to mess up your beautiful napkin. You can do it again. Thank you. All right. So let's say I am at a networking function, and they have some tasty food. All right, we're going to pretend this is like some chicken fingers. I'm going to get my napkin, and I'm going to put it down here. This takes some practice. You practice this when you get home, okay? Get your little plate. You put your food on your plate. Again, only if there are tables at this event. You can also get a drink. Typically you want to hold the drink on top of the plate, so you're not going to have much room. No, just a couple little chicken fingers here, right? And they're going to load it up. This is not dinner. So a couple little items. Save room for this cup so that you can hold all three of these things in one hand, right? So that's really important because you want to save that hand, right, to shake hands. Now, I would recommend just doing one thing or the other because that gets really awkward to balance all of that, and you might spill. So it's probably better just to have one thing and just go with the drink and then have a hand free. Now, you don't want to be switching back and forth because then what? It's a wet, probably cold hand from ice cubes, and that's no fun to shake. So try to just do that. If you decide to go with the food option, make sure that you are holding the plate in your right hand, eating with your left, right? So I'm getting this left hand dirty with my yummy chicken fingers. And then that way if someone comes up to shake hands with me or greet me, then I can just quickly switch to my dirty hand, and this hand is still clean, right? So I can shake hands with them. So a couple little things that can make a big difference in situations, so you're not just like, have food on your mouth and juggling stuff or spilling stuff and making yourself, look not as good as you'd like. So a couple little tips in that situation. Now, another part, relates to networking events and receptions. Conversation. Sometimes that can be challenging, right? You walk into this room of people and everyone seems to have someone that they're talking with, they're paired up or they're in groups, they're in cliques, and you're intimidated, right? Hopefully you've thought in advance about this event, the purpose of the event. Who's going to be there? Are there specific people that will be attending that you want to talk to? And if so, what kinds of questions do you have for them? Prepare yourself mentally. What you're going to wear, what you're going to say, kind of have a goal in mind for the people that you want to connect with while you're there. So there's more of a purpose behind this event. And try not to, I have been guilty of this myself in years past, I promise you. You get into that situation, you're like, food, right? And you use that as your crutch. You're like, I'm just going to stand here and eat or drink and figure it out. But really try to use that time for networking. That's what it's for, to really connect with people. And chances are other people are feeling the same way you are. So you may even want to have a strategy of trying to single out if there's a person that's standing by themselves. Maybe they're eating too, or they have a drink, or they're across the room. Try to connect with that person first, and then go from there. Now, starting a conversation with someone. Any thoughts? How would you do that? Talk about the weather, introduce yourself. Okay. Yeah. Oh, Oh, repeat the questions. Okay. Yes. So we have a couple things that have been thrown out. I think I would go first with an introduction. So introduce yourself. And then maybe ask them some questions about themselves. Try to keep these open-ended questions. So don't ask a question that's going to elicit a yes or no answer, because then that stops there, right? What you want to do is ask them questions that start with who, what, when, where, how, right? So if this is, let's pretend it's a professional association meeting, and I want to go talk with Lindsay, right? So I walk over to her. Hi, I'm Holly Getchell. It's
Hi.
nice to meet you.
Lindsay Day, nice to meet you.
It's my first meeting that I've been to for this professional association. How long have you been a member?
Not too long, only about 6 months.
Okay. And you get the point. It can go from there. I could then say something else more about, well, what do you like about this organization, on and on. All right, so that keeps the conversation going. So the introduction is key, having a few questions to start with, and then certainly sustaining it by continuing to ask them questions and listening. A good conversationalist has more to do with listening than speaking, right? So be a good listener for that person. Now, I have a challenging question for you. You've probably all been in this situation at one point or another. There's a person that's really talkative, right? You have gotten cornered. You are talking to this person. This could be in a social situation. It could be like an aunt or uncle, something at a family reunion, and they just will not stop talking. And there's a whole group of people you want to talk with, right? So you've got, it takes some practice, but you've got to get to the point where you feel comfortable, and you can do it politely, but in that conversation. Right? So like at a professional association meeting, the example I was just using, you might insert, when you can, sometimes it's hard to get a word in, say, Lindsay, it's been really nice to have a conversation. I'm going to go network with some others in the room now, but it was really great to see you. I'm going to follow up by email on what we talked about. Here's my business card, or something like that. Right? So there's a conclusion to that. It's positive. I'm saying something I'm going to do to follow up, or thanking the person, whatever it is, and that gives you that opportunity to then move to talk to someone else. All right, so don't get stuck in that situation where you're just like, this is a waste of an evening. I've talked to one person the whole night. And promise me that happens a lot. I see you shaking your head too, Dr. Carter.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, so let's keep moving. Speaks for itself. You want to be on time. And this goes really for everything. But particularly, again, when we're talking about employers, if you're late, even a minute late, sometimes that makes the decision, right? If they have a bunch of candidates they're interviewing or considering, that might kick you out of the pool of candidates simply because you were late, again, even if it was just a couple minutes. So really plan ahead to make sure that you have enough time to get where you're going, that you've got directions, you know where you're going to park. Plan for things that out of your control to happen. Travel, just accidents, things, day-to-day delays that we all experience, I think are important to be aware of. If it's at a restaurant, again, it's a lunch or dinner kind of function, I would make sure that I had like a cell phone number, if possible, for the employer, if they're willing to give that out. And if that's not available, then look up the restaurant, make sure you have a number for the restaurant, so that if you do get into a situation where you are running late, at least you can call and notify that person or the restaurant that you are running late, that you'll be there shortly. So at least you're handling it the best way you can. Would be my recommendation there. I think now things are so easy because we have all these kind of, GPS and things like that that help us get where we're going, so that makes things certainly a little bit easier. All right, keep going. All right, formal place setting. How often do we see this? Not much at my house. Special occasions, maybe. This is something that you need to be comfortable with, though, because, again, if we're dining with an employer at a nice restaurant, the table might be set like this or something similar to this. And so being comfortable with the placement of the utensils and the plates, the glassware, so that you don't have that moment where you're embarrassed because you think, gosh, I don't know which utensil to use or which glass to use. You may have heard the rule of thumb that you start from the outside and work your way in, and that's exactly what you want to do. So the first course that's served, you're going to start out here, so like a salad or soup on the far end, okay? And then go from there. Typically at a fine dining restaurant, they're going to take away those plates or bowls and utensils that you've just used, and so it's going to keep shrinking, and so it'll be pretty easy to figure out as you keep going which utensils to use at what point in the meal. Okay, and you've even got some special utensils for dessert up here, so at the end of the meal, when the server comes to remove your entree, your plate, then you can pull the utensils down to the sides, and so the fork on the left and the spoon on the right. Now, there is a little trick. Some of you may have learned this in the past. I see you doing it. I'm going to give you a prize. Will you tell the group what you just did and what it means? Okay, so I want everybody to do this. Humor me. Thank you. I want you to make a B and a D. Okay, so left hand B, right hand D. Just as she said, it stands for bread, which is going to be on the left, and drink, which is going to be on the right. Okay, so you're not going to do this at the table in front of everyone, right? What you're going to do, if you even need to do it at all, is just a little reminder on your lap or under the table, okay? But this is helpful. Trust me, it sounds really trivial, but I have been at conferences where they have these round tables that are really nice. They have the white linens set beautifully, but it is so packed full that it is honestly hard to tell, is this my glass, is this their glass? And I have been in situations where someone took my water glass because the table is just so full, and perhaps they did not have etiquette training like you were getting today, right? So in that instance, you don't, smack their hand or say, hey, you took my water, or, of course you don't really necessarily address that with the person. You just politely ask the server to bring water or utensil or whatever it is that is messed up. The unfortunate part about that, though, is it messes up the whole table, because then it forces that next person to grab the water glass, and it's just like a domino effect. So don't be that person, okay? Use your B&D trick to help you. We're going to look at this again later after I've covered some of the other slides as a little reminder. But that's, I think, all we'll cover on this slide for now. B&D. Move on. Okay, and this is more likely to be the visual at a fine dining establishment. Here's the actual visual. And I messed it up, but Lindsay had a nice little napkin she placed there for me, which transitions well to this slide. Let's talk just a couple minutes about napkins and utensils. Okay, we saw from the video, Sarah, she got there late, which we all know is bad, right? And then what did she do? Yeah, and then she does this, right? Like she's at some family picnic and she's about to eat ribs or something. That obviously is an exaggeration of what not to do. Typically, you want to remove the napkin. Sometimes it's on the plate or in, like a nice glass, and just, remove it and place it on your lap gently below the table, right? Not midair, but just unfolding it in your lap. What you want to do is have the fold toward you, right? So often these will be like in a rectangle or a triangle. And the reason you want it that way is you're just going to bring it up to dab, right? This is not like a full facial swab, right? This is not like raking it across your face. This is just gently dabbing the corners of your mouth. Okay, so keeping in mind that you shouldn't really be getting a lot on your face, because hopefully you're eating appropriately small bites and you don't have big pieces of lettuce with salad dressing on your cheek, or a roll with butter and have butter smeared on your cheek, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But small bites and just dabbing your mouth when needed. So let's say that in the middle of the meal, I have to go to the restroom. Does anybody know where I should put my napkin? This group is good. Yes, you should put it in your chair. So I would put it in the chair, excuse myself, and then come back and again place it on my lap. Now at the end of the meal, where should I put my napkin? Yes, in place of the plate. You're going to have food on the plate, so you don't want to put your napkin on top of the food. That's not appropriate. But typically, hopefully, the server has removed the plate, and then you can place this where the plate was. Okay? I think that's pretty much it for napkins. Y'all were pretty informed on that, so that's great. Utensils. We sort of covered that already. I think one more thing I would add to that is just, if you're not sure, sometimes they'll have some kind of different utensil that you haven't seen before, and you're not familiar, and you're not sure, just observe the people around you and see what they do. That's a good rule of thumb. If you drop something, quietly, politely ask your server for another utensil. You don't want to make, what'd you say? No 5-second rule, no. And you don't want to draw a lot of attention, as we saw from the video. And you want to treat your server or servers with respect. Hopefully that goes without saying. They're an ally. They're there to help you. So typically, if you just politely tell them what it is that you need, they'll get that for you. And sometimes people at the table won't even know that it happened. And that's the idea, is it happens discreetly. All right, let's move on to ordering. Okay, who in here, raise your hand, if you have gone out to dinner, lunch, a meal with someone, and they take forever ordering? Okay, I see some hands. Um, that's not appropriate. What you want to do is, ideally, something I do, even if I'm going out with friends, I'll look at the menu in advance. What looks good? What do I think I want to order? That way I can spend the time there talking with them and not worrying about the menu and what I can eat or what looks good to me. So if that's even a possibility, do it in advance. If not, try not to take a lot of time considering your order or placing your order. Now, some other considerations in terms of the price. You don't, as we again saw from the video, don't want to order the lobster. We don't want to order the most expensive item on the meal or an item that's like market price. We don't know how much that is, right? And usually that's more. And we don't necessarily want to order the least expensive item either. All right, so mid-range is appropriate. And even beyond that, asking the host or hostess, the employer, for recommendations. Because typically they will then say, well, as he did in the video, the prime rib is really great. I've had that in the past, and that's what I would recommend. Great question. Thank you. The question was about if you're a vegetarian, how do you handle that? Sometimes at functions, there's a preset menu. The host or hostess has already decided what will be served. And so it's more, there's no ordering that occurs. They're just bringing out, salads or soups and the meal and so forth. So in that situation, again, be discreet. When the server comes to your side, get their attention and just tell them, I'm a vegetarian. Do you have a vegetable plate or a pasta or something that you could bring out? The answer is almost always yes, and so it's just a matter of notifying them and telling them what you would be able to eat, giving them some options so that they can then make that change in the back and bring out something that you can enjoy. And same thing if you have allergies, you certainly want to let them know that as well. But the goal is to not inform the whole table of all of your allergies, but just to inform the server discreetly so that they can bring out something appropriate. Yes, great question. Sometimes they will even ask you on like a conference form or some kind of invitation. It'll say, do you have special dietary needs? And at that point would be a great time to tell them. If they don't provide that and you do, again, in advance would be ideal so that they can make that adjustment. Because the host or hostess, chances are, is going to feel bad that they didn't plan ahead for that or know that in advance because they are concerned about you and they don't want you to feel awkward or uncomfortable at any point during that meal. All right, let's see. One other thing about, I just wanted to tell a quick story before we get on to alcohol here. Quick story about an experience I had. We had a position available several years ago in the Career Center, and we interviewed candidates, and each of us on the administrative team took one candidate to lunch. Sounds good, right? So get to lunch with my candidate, and she was pretty much like the person in the video, believe it or not, maybe even worse. And she actually ordered a plate of French fries. And I ordered, it was like a nicer place with like the salad and the meal and so forth. And so it was pretty awkward. Because then here I am, having several courses, and then she just has this plate of French fries. And so think about, even if you really love French fries, you want to think about the group that you're with or the person that you're with, and you don't want them to feel awkward or uncomfortable at any point. So just want to think things through. And so just keep little stuff like that in mind. In terms of alcohol, let's talk about this. I know the video addressed it a little bit, but to talk about it in a little bit more detail, because we certainly get this question a lot at the Career Center. The video said 1 drink. I may even go as far as saying no drinks, just because, again, treat this as an interview. Yes, it's a lunch. Yes, it's a dinner, but you should still think of it as an interview. And would you drink during an interview? I don't think so, right? So you want to have your A game on. And if you have even 1 drink, sometimes that, is going to impact you. So just think about that. I would really encourage you to certainly not have one at all. And if you do choose to have one with the group, if others are having it, then certainly limit it to 1. And again, keep the mindset that you are here for the purpose of impressing that employer or employers and you can certainly do that after this event or function or meal on your own time. This is just a little snapshot in time, so hopefully you can go without for that period of time. But you run a lot of risk, and I think that probably goes without saying if you have more than that. And I have heard some stories, trust me, from employers that were actually fairly interested in some candidates, and the person didn't get the offer. They had several drinks, and they started behaving differently, and the employer saw a different side of them, and then they weren't asked for a second or third interview, and they didn't go forward in the process. And that's a shame, because they had been interested prior to that. So, things to keep in mind. We talked about this earlier. I told you you're going to start getting hungry here in a minute. I'm going to start throwing up some slides of food. So, don't order the lobster, right? That's what Sarah did in the video, and that was definitely a no-no. So keep that cost, be sensitive to cost when you're placing that order. I think that's key. All right, let's talk about bread. Who loves bread? I love bread. All kinds of bread. Rolls, toast, muffins, all of it. There are different rules for different things, and so I want to talk through those. Rolls like this, okay? You're typically going to have these. In fact, this is what I see most at conferences and workshops and events. We do a lot of stuff at the Georgia Center. The Georgia Center loves to serve these kind of rolls. You do not want to change the shape of your face by eating a roll, right? So you're not like trying to fit this roll in your mouth, right? No. We are tearing off small pieces of this roll, right? Small bite-sized pieces. And we are buttering each of those small pieces with bread. A lot longer, more time-consuming. Like, gosh, I really want that bread. But just slow the process down, small bites, butter each one, eat each one, have a little conversation, come back to your bread, and do it like that. The exception to that would be like if there's some kind of toast or garlic bread that's already buttered, you don't have to tear that off because that's going to get messy. You can eat that as a whole piece, okay? If it's, let's say it's a muffin, something that comes out hot, you can cut that in half, put the butter in so that it can melt, but then you still need to revert back to tearing off small pieces of that and eating small bite-sized portions of that, okay? So what about the loaf of bread? Have you ever been in that situation where you go out to the restaurant and they just bring like a loaf? And you're like, oh no, how do we do this? So in that situation, what you want to do is not touch the whole loaf of bread, right? Because then people are going to be like, okay, I don't want any of that now, right? Just if it's like the end of the loaf, grab that part, use the knife to cut, and then just pull your piece away. All right? You don't want to be groping the whole loaf of bread because then other people will be like, no thanks, I'm good. And that can be difficult. I'm not a big fan of those situations. Sometimes they'll pre-slice it, and that definitely helps. But all of this sounds silly, but it does. It's stuff that we encounter every day, right? Whether it be in social situations or business situations. So the more that you've thought about how to handle these situations, the more you know how to handle these situations, you're just going to come across more at ease and more confident and more prepared, more polished, all of those things. I think that's it for bread. We'll move on to packets of sugar. Lindsay will be our demonstration here. So the rule of thumb with this is to not have more than 2 packets of sugar at a meal. I don't know how committed I am to that, but let's go with it. That's what I've read. The literature out there says 2 packets. What I will say, though, is it's important to not make a lot of trash. And so you don't want to just be ripping off the tops of these, and just like having all these like Sweet and Low or Splenda or whatever packets on the table, kind of creating a little pile or a mess. What you want to do is tear it 3/4 of the way, and then use it to put it in your drink. And then at that point, you can actually take the trash, and it's only 1 piece, right? Not 2, because we haven't torn it all the way off. So take that 1 piece of trash, and you can just slide it under like the bottom of your bread plate, or even like your saucer if there's like coffee or tea or something like that. And that's just kind of discreetly tucking it away instead of, again, kind of accruing or rounding up a little pile of packets. All right, so little things, but things I hope you'll be able to implement. I thought this was a funny image. This is Salt and Pepper. They're married. Okay? They travel together. All right? So if you're, again, at one of those tables, kind of community food, there's bread baskets, there's butter, salt and pepper, all these things that the group is going to be sharing, remember that Salt and Pepper are married. They travel as a pair. Right? So if Lindsay's across the table and she asks me for salt, she's going to get the salt, but she's also going to get the pepper. Right? So I'm going to pass that to the right, because that's the direction you always pass those community items, is to the right. And it's going to make its way around to her, and she's going to have both of those. All right. Let's talk about salad, dressings, and things of that nature. So another common thing at some of these events is there be like really like a gravy boat, but it might be filled with salad dressing, right? And you're sharing this with the other people at your table. And it's got to make its way all the way around the table. And again, we're doing that to the right, right? And what you want to do is make sure that the handle of that is pointed toward that person. All right, so I'm going to present it to Lindsay with the handle toward her so that she can grab it, and that's hopefully going to eliminate any kind of spills or accidents from happening. Okay, instead of her trying to grab this slippery salad dressing container without a handle. So keep that in mind. And of course, that would go with other stuff too. It could be creamers, could be again gravy, syrup if you're having pancakes or kind of a breakfast or brunch meal.
A lot of times when you have this type of thing, they split.
Yes.
After you fry, you turn it right, and then still, you don't want to like.
I have wondered the same thing in the past. I don't have a good answer for you for that. The question is about it dripping. And so if you get it right, you have the handle, but then it's dripping off the other side, there's really nothing I would say you can do about that. Just do your best to hand it to the person, and I guess that's just really unavoidable. But great question. Sometimes they will have a little plate underneath, but sometimes the plate is too small and it still drops off to the side. So don't worry. Again, you're just doing the best you can in that situation. But that's a good question because that does happen in terms of things dripping. All right, let's move on from here to talk about soup. All right, so with soup, we don't have a bowl as a prop here, but you should take your spoon, and it should be in a circle away from you. And you've probably heard this before, right? It's probably a good reminder, though. So if you have soup, just scoop that away from you and then bring it back in a circular motion. And we're not eating the soup like this, right? We're eating it from the side. So keep that in mind. We're not going to blow on the soup, right? We're also not going to slurp our soup. So soup can be a little more challenging to eat, so you may just want to skip it entirely if you're concerned about eating soup. But those are a couple things to keep in mind. Now, there are two different styles of eating. We've got the American style and the continental style. So I want to take just a couple minutes to talk about the difference between the two. So the American style is probably what most of you are familiar with. And there is a picture here. I don't know how well you can see it. But basically it entails, might be easier if I just sit here for a second. Let's pretend, what do I have now? Let's pretend I have a steak. So I'm going to use my fork, the steak. I'm going to make a cut, right? And then as soon as I make that cut, I'm going to put the knife at the top of the plate. And then I'm going to switch hands, right? And then I'm going to eat my bite of food. So that's American style. There's a lot of cutting and hand switching going on, right? Now, the European or continental method removes that. So if I'm, again, steak, I'm cutting, and then I'm actually just using my fork to bring it to my mouth. So it's more efficient, I guess, from that standpoint, right? Because you're not doing all the switching. It really doesn't matter. It's more of comfort, what you prefer, what you grew up doing. The key is to be consistent. All right? So you're not going to start with one method at the beginning of the meal and go to another method. Just pick something and go with it. Is that, I tried to explain that the best I could. Is that pretty clear, the difference between the two? Yeah, I was assuming right-handed when I was giving that example. So if you're left-handed, just, again, kind of find the style that works for you and do what, makes sense for you. Make adjustments. So a lot of these things, there's some flexibility there. And a lot of it's presented from the assumption that you're a right-handed person. So that's a great question in terms of what a left-handed person should do. The bottom line here is be consistent and be comfortable with whatever method you choose. I wanted to come back to this slide. This is a refresher of what we've talked about so far in terms of the napkin, utensils, the plates, the glasses, and so forth. Most of this will stay. The glasses, dessert, spread plate, all that'll stay. The utensils are going to disappear, and the plate will probably disappear here. Hopefully the server will come remove that, which then leads us to dessert, which I wanted to show. I think that's it's right after this one. I wanted to make a comment about buffets. All you can eat. Yay, right? So if you're in the buffet setting, that's the option. Everybody's just going to grab a plate and go eat from the buffet. You want to keep in mind a couple things. You want to get a variety of foods, and you do not want to fill your plate up, right? You're not mounding your plate up with food. You don't want to go get like a full plate of just macaroni and cheese, and you may love macaroni and cheese, but this is not the time, right? We want just like a little sampling of a few things. I'm not going to go overboard because this is hopefully not your last meal, right? And so this is just, it's more about visiting with people. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm going to eat this plate and then I'm going to go back and have 2 more. So keep that in mind in all these situations. That is really more about visiting with the employer and the other people there, and try not to have the focus be on the food. You brought up a great question earlier about the preset meal and, vegetarian or people have allergies. And so we really already covered that, but just, again, discreetly informing the server of whatever your needs are so that they can make some adjustments to the meal. I'm going to say the question is about whether or not you should eat soups or things that you're unsure of. I would say no. I mean, if you've got allergies, I would probably ask the server, again, discreetly, is there whatever it is you're allergic to, is that in the dressing? Do you know? Sometimes they may not know, and they'll say, I'll find out and come back and tell you. If they're not sure, I wouldn't make a big production from there. If they've gone or asked and it's unclear or they don't know, then I would probably just go with the plain salad or skip the salad. Again, because this is just one meal in time. It's not the only meal or the last meal. So just use your best judgment. I think it's bottom line for a lot of these. I think just trying to do what makes sense. Did you have a question? Great question. Yes, there can be cultural differences and things like that. But the question is, do you eat everything on your plate? Do you leave something on your plate? Most of the stuff that I've heard and learned over the years is to leave a little bit on your plate. So again, it's not like you came to this starving and you're just scarfing down everything and using bread to sop up any sauces or things like that. But that you've enjoyed your meal. You don't have to eat every bite, right? You're going to leave some of it on there. Maybe even same room for dessert, which I think is my next slide. Yes, chocolate cake. Okay. You're going to be hungry, right? Are you hungry? Getting there? So, so dessert. In this situation, again, defer to the host or hostess. If they say, I'm going to have dessert, or I really love the chocolate cake here, it's delicious, I recommend it. Again, that doesn't mean you have to go with that, but they're saying, in other words, they're saying, I'm going to order dessert. So they're giving you permission. And you're like, yes, I love dessert. So, in some situations, you have a group of people at the table, and I know this happens to me, I feel like a lot. Where they're like, I'm not going to get dessert. Are you going to get dessert? I'm not sure about dessert. And the whole table is just like looking at one another like, please, someone order dessert, right? Have you been in that situation? And then you're thinking, don't ask me to share because I don't want to share. I want all of that chocolate cake. So just kind of go with the flow of the group and kind of what people are doing in terms of dessert and whether to order it or not. A couple final thoughts here before we go to our quiz and wrap things up. And there are more items that I could have added. I just wanted to have a few kind of final thoughts of what not to do while dining. So you're not going to have your phone on the table or maybe even with you if that's possible. And if it is with you, it's hopefully in your purse or your pocket or somewhere away. But don't be that person that has it with them and has it on the table or even worse, taking a call like Sarah did in the video, right? That's a no-no. If you do need to make a call, just excuse yourself from the table entirely and go somewhere else to do that. And only if it's really, really important. Hopefully, whatever it is can wait till after the meal and you can just check messages or return calls at that point. For women here, make sure you're not just sitting there at the table like reapplying lipstick, right? Not a good idea. Just excuse yourself, go to the restroom, and then come back. Not a good time to be taking all your medications and pills, right? Nobody needs to see that. You can wait and do that later. Stacking plates. You don't want to be the person in the video that stacked the plates either. They're like clearing the table. They think they're being helpful, but it's really not proper etiquette. So you don't want to be sitting there stacking up all the, saucers and the, utensils and plates, and it's this like wobbly mess, and you're presenting it like, hey, get this out of my way, right? Let the server do their job and do that and remove those plates and utensils and so forth for you. Are there other things that you can think of you want to add to this list? Things that annoy you or that you've had happen when you're in groups? Typically, the host or hostess pays for the meal. So the host or hostess is the person that does the inviting. So whoever invites you, whether this be a social setting and it's a date, or whether it's an employer the person that invites you is the person that pays, and they will pay for the tip as well. Okay? That's the etiquette with that. So remember that. If you're inviting someone to a meal, you're the one that's going to be paying for that meal and the tip. Now, if you're close friends, that's a little different, and your friend offers to pay for your lunch, you might say, well, hey, I'll pay for the tip. Now, that's up to you, and that's a little bit more relaxed, kind of informal. But I'm talking mostly about employers and kind of business settings when I'm covering a lot of these. And in that situation, a simple thank you is appropriate. Just thank them. This was a delicious meal. Thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed our conversation. That's appropriate. And that's, of course, in person, verbally. You want to follow that up then with a thank you note, which I believe is the next slide, and have a written thank you. Right? We're not talking about cutesy stationery here. We're talking about just simple, traditional, plain thank you stationery, like you see here. All right? And follow up pretty quickly. You don't want a lot of time to go by. You want it to be fresh in their memory, right? So send this, hopefully within 24, 48 hours after you've had that meal or met this person to express appreciation that way. There was a question over here. Ooh, that's tricky. I think I would probably be inclined to say no. But, I mean, again, it's your judgment call. And if you do decide to go, as we go back to the earlier part of the presentation, I would have one and limit it to one and be really strict with that. And then, again, thank them and end the evening at that point. You don't want to get too casual. Sometimes it's a trick or a test to kind of see how casual or relaxed you're going to get. So be careful of that. Sometimes the tensions are good and they, are just wanting to get to know you better. But sometimes it's a test. So be wary. Yes. The question was about where to put your silverware when you're done eating. So there are a couple things that are out there, but a lot of it basically says to put it at like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. So if we have like a clock image, then it's, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock on your plate with the tines down. And that signals to your server that you are finished eating, right? If you still have your knife at the top, you're probably still eating. If you have your utensils in some other placement, probably still eating. So this is really the only way that they know for sure that, in fact, you are finished eating. And if they are unsure, and you may have had this happen in the past, they'll typically come up and ask you before they remove your plate. Thank you for that question. So we have a quick quiz, and I want Lindsay to go through the quiz. We do have some more Frisbees and prizes to give away. And then I want to allow some time if there are any additional questions, although y'all had some really great questions. I appreciate your time and your attention. And so I want to end on kind of a fun note here with a quiz to test your knowledge. All right, so let's go ahead and do that.
Can I have one more what not to do?
Yes, one more not.
I have one more what not to do. When you're eating at a meal, it's not really the time to try foods you might not have tried before in terms of if you've never had sushi before and don't really know how to use chopsticks, keep those things in mind. It's not just like barbecue ribs. Like spaghetti can be a mess. Like try to get foods that will minimize the amount of mess you're going to make too. Because there's nothing worse than just having food across your face or things like that.
Right, and even sandwiches that seem like they would be fine, you get a sandwich and all of a sudden it's got all these sauces and it's falling apart and it's a lot messier than you thought it would be. So just, it's a great point to just make sure that you're choosing the most appropriate item that's not going to be very messy.
Let's go ahead and make sure, because we have time. There's no rush. As soon as they start getting close, they think they're winding down. They start pushing things away. What questions have you got? Anything that you've run into before? This is your opportunity. Certainly don't ask me afterwards, because I just learned a whole lot of things I didn't understand. But ask how you're busy right now. Things that have come up or you've often wondered about.
I think there's
I want you to ask questions.
a question right here.
We got a lot of questions.
Okay, we'll take this one first.
Someone, especially if the person that you're interviewing you orders a dessert, should you order dessert too?
The question is, if the person with you orders a dessert, should you order dessert too? I think no. If you don't want dessert, no pressure to order dessert. Just like alcohol earlier we talked about. If they order a drink, that doesn't mean you have to order a drink, right? So just because they order something doesn't mean you have to. Just, again, tell them, I'm full. Thank you for the offer, but I'm full. I appreciate it, though. Would be a nice way to handle that. You certainly don't want to get in talking about diets and things like that. I think sometimes I've been at events where people launch into, no, I can't have that. I'm on this really strict diet, and I can only eat blah, 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 blah. And then they start just going off on this whole diet plan, and you're thinking, oh, boy, what have I just done? So, definitely limit the short answer.
Say you're at lunch and
are supposed to pass it to the right. Emily Post, Mrs. Manners. I'm pretty confident if she were in here, she would tell us it has to travel all the way around the table. I know that sounds crazy, but that is the etiquette.
I did read, because I've written a chapter about this on my IPL book, but I did read where they said if it's person immediately to your left, that's what it says. You can't cheat. But this is like the interviewing thing. There's so many different opinions. There isn't like the napkin. What did you say about the napkin sort of thing? I mean, I read so much, and I got so confused by reading some of the things that she's talking about today because this person thinks you should do this and that person thinks you should do that. You're all supposed to be experts. Shoot, I don't know. I always go with what I read the most. It seems to keep coming up.
Same thing
And
here.
I figured that must be it. But I did read that one because that's a great question. It seems ludicrous to go around a 10-person table. And I did read ones where they said the person right next to you, go ahead and give it to them. But
I'm with you. That's what I've read the most is actually that it goes all the way to the right and all the way around the table. That's proper etiquette. Although I, admittedly, in the past, have just given it to the person to my left because I just felt awkward, being like, well, you're going to have to wait a minute because these other 10 people are going to have it first. So, now that I wouldn't do. I would use the rule of thumb that Dr. Carnot just mentioned. If they're immediately to your left, then I would say that's kind of the exception I would make personally. But otherwise, I mean, really the rationale is that most everyone at the table the salt or the pepper. So it's probably got to make its way all the way around the table anyway. So that to the right kind of rule is really set up for that purpose, to make sure it gets to everybody at the table without people having to like stretch like they've got elastic arm to get to things or spill things. So proper etiquette, but again, use your best judgment. Sometimes there are exceptions. Yes, I've heard different things over on that, and in terms of exiting and entering your chair, I've heard different things on that in the past as well. So I'm not sure that I have a really good answer for you on that one. The thing that I have had or read most repeatedly is more about the server. Now, the server typically will present food to your left, and then when they're removing food, will remove food from the right. That's what I've heard more consistently than like how you enter or exit your chair. So I know that's not answering your question, but there's so much mixed information and literature out there. Sometimes it's hard to say. No, the question is, do you excuse yourself from the table if you need to blow your nose? Please. Because I personally, I get like weirded out by that. So don't be that person that's like blowing your nose at the table because that chances are that's really kind of grossing everybody else out. Even if it's at the end of the meal, just politely excuse yourself and take care of that business